babe.
Hey.
What's up?
Turns out that Akumu loves your quilt.
Aw.
No, he really loves your quilt.
Oh, no. Hey, friends. Welcome back to my sewing room. My name is Becca, and it's true. My littlest puppy, Akumu, loves to eat my quilts. I don't know how to keep him from doing this. We're still trying to teach him that his chewing is meant for the bones and the toys only, but anything that has fabric in it, this little guy just likes to eat, and it's weird. I now have 3 quilts in my home that look like the hungry caterpillar has made their way through them. So I need to find a way to help him stop doing that. So if you have any tips, leave them in the comments down below. But more importantly, I need to find a way to repair these quilts because honestly, way too much time and effort went into this quilt and the other 2 as well to just throw it out. I still want to use the quilt, especially this one. This was one that had a lot of special meaning to me, by the way. This is a pattern that I wrote. It is called Tumbling Blocks. And I made this with half of a layer cake, and the other half of a layer cake my friend Mary put into a sister quilt of this. So this means a lot to me and I want to keep it. If you're interested in picking up this pattern, I will link it in the description box down below. It's really easy to make. You can make it in an afternoon. It's a lot of fun. But the point of today's video is to show you what I'm going to do to repair this. So let's just get right to the sewing. So this is the quilt that we're going to repair. Now there are a couple of ways that we could do this. Obviously, if I wanted this to be seamless, I could pull the fabric that I have on the border on the front as well as the fabric that's on the back, and I could clean this up and hand stitch down some fabric and even come in and hand quilt the design element back into it so that it kind of looks seamless. But this isn't a show quilt, and this really is the quilt that I like to cuddle with when I'm watching TV, so I don't care if it looks like it's been repaired. The whole goal of my repair is just to make sure that I'm addressing all of these nasty raw edges that are in here so that I can wash the quilt. If I were to wash it right now, all of this would start to fray and it could be a problem. So there's 2 ways that I feel like off the top of my head I could do that. The first way is I could come in and cut around all of those areas and make this a nice clean kind of square rectangular hole, and then take it to a machine with a zigzag stitch and just do a really tight zigzag all the way around the inside of that. That's definitely going to address the raw edges and it will allow me to wash the quilt, but I'll still have a hole in here and I don't want a hole. So let's cover that up instead of just zigzagging the edges. I do have some scrap fabric that's left over from the backing of the quilt, and I have some scrap fabric that's left over from the border, and I feel like I can use these to kind of create like a little patch just on top to cover that up. So the first thing I'll want to do is take a ruler and kind of measure how big of a piece am I going to need that's going to cover all of the damaged areas. So I'm going to lay my ruler down here, and it looks like if I do a 3.5 inch square, it's going to be really big. I don't know that I need all of that, but a 2.5 inch square should cover everything up. So I'm going to cut from my backing scrap a 3 inch piece of fabric, 2 of them actually. That's going to allow me to have a nice seam allowance. You'll see what I'm going to do here in a second. So I've got 2 pieces of my backing fabric cut at 3 inches. And then from my border fabric, I need 2 pieces that are 3 inches as well. But this time, I want to fussy cut out a pretty butterfly. So I'm going to try and find a whole butterfly that if I were to cut a 3 inch piece of fabric, the whole butterfly will show. inside of like a 2.5 inch area, because once I take a 1/4 inch seam around all 4 sides, I still want to be able to see the butterfly. And this one looks like a good contender. The other piece I'm not going to worry about because the other piece will be on the back, so I don't care how the butterfly lays, but this one I'm going to be able to put on the top. So I'm just going to take a little bit of time to kind of fussy cut that right out of the middle. Obviously, this is a little bit bigger than what I need, so I'm going to bring in a ruler, and I'm going to line this up so that I've got my 3-inch mark on top of the fabric, and I'm just looking to make sure that the 1/4 inch away from that 3-inch mark all the way around is going to not touch or cut into the butterfly. So for example, right along here, you can see the 1/4 inch mark on my ruler is just hitting up against the edge of this wing. Same thing up here. And then over here, the 2 3/4 mark is lining up with this edge of the wing. And then 2 3/4 is really kind of down at the bottom. So it'll look like the butterfly is kind of floating off or flying away. So let's just clean this up and get it nice and squared at 3 inches. Once my fabrics are cut out, I'm going to take them to the sewing machine and I'm going to place them right sides together, and I'm going to sew around all 4 sides, but I'm going to leave a hole on one of the sides so I can reach down in here and turn it right side out. I am sewing with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and when I start and finish my sewing, I am back stitching to help strengthen that seam for when I reach in and turn it right side out. Now with the other piece, the piece that's going to be on the top, I can actually sew with the fussy cut butterfly on the top, and I can see the print from the wrong side of the fabric. So I'm just going to make sure that when I'm doing that, my seam allowance is not cutting off any part of the butterfly. I'm stitching next to it, not on top of it. And that'll help the fussy cut butterfly kind of stay where it needs to be. Once I have my pieces sewn, I'm just going to reach into the fabric in between those 2 layers. I'm going to push it right side out. Backstitching when we started and stopped sewing that seam around all 4 sides is going to help reinforce that seam so that hopefully none of your stitches will pop while you're doing this. I do like to grab some sort of a pointy object, nothing sharp, to help push those corners out. And if you really want a really crisp corner, you may need to consider clipping the bulk in your corners to get a really nice point. I'm not going to really worry about that. I just want a patch that I can use to put on the quilt. Once your squares are turned right side out, I like to reach inside of the hole where I turned this and give the fabric a little bit of a shake and use my fingers to line up the folds so that they're right next to each other. And then I'll come in with a clip and just use that to kind of hold it in place. I'm going to do that to both pieces. Now with the piece that's going to go on the front, I just want to make sure that I have got the fussy cut butterfly on the front. Okay, now it's time to put the patches onto the quilt. So the first thing I'm going to do is get the patch that's going to go on the front, and I'm going to lay it down in the position that I want it to be. I'm just going to make sure that this patch is covering the area that needs to be patched. And then I'm going to take some pins and I'm going to pin all 4 sides of that patch. By pinning it through the quilt and the patch, I am going to be able to see from the back approximately where the patch on the front lines up. That way, when I stitch it down from the front, I'm going to grab the patch that's on the back. They'll be kind of lined up together. I'm going to flip this over, and now I can see on the back side where the pins are. And I want to make sure that my patch is covering those pins. So to do that, I'm going to lay it on here, and then I'm going to grab some more pins. And this time I'm going to put the pin through the back patch, the quilt, and the front patch. And I'm going to put these at an angle so that they're not going to interfere with the pins that are on the front. There we go. I only need 2 really to hold it in place, but I think I'm going to do 4 just to be extra safe. One in each corner. I normally don't do pins, so this is probably a first for you seeing me use pins. All right, now that I have that pinned in place, I'm going to take this to my sewing machine, and honestly, I'm just going to stitch about 1/8 of an inch around the edge of this patch and cross my fingers that it actually catches on the back. I am actually just testing with my fingers to make sure that the edges of the patches are kind of on top of each other. It feels like they are. Let's go sew this. Maneuvering this quilt into the throat of my machine is going to be a pain in the butt, but because Akumu did me a solid here and he chewed through a hole on the edge of the quilt, it means that I can patch this by sewing along 2 sides, breaking thread, and then pivoting the quilt so that I don't have to put the entire bulk of the quilt in the machine. I can just kind of reposition where I'm sewing it from, if that makes any sense. So when I get to the side that is kind of up against the bulk of the quilt, rather than trying to stitch it from the back, I'm going to flip this over and I'm going to stitch it down from the front once I rethread my machine. There. Now that the machine's rethreaded, I can stitch the front patch. I do have some loose threads that I'm going to clip off of this. I'm looking at this patch and it is not super clean. It's not super tidy, but it's a patch on a quilt, so that's okay for me. I am going to come through and just quilt an X through it as well, just maybe to give it a little bit more stability. There we go. Once this is all stitched on, I can tell, obviously, where it's patched, up close anyway. From far away, you can see a little bit of the difference in texture, but the purpose has been met. I can now wash the quilt, which is really all I wanted to do to begin with. So this is what I did to patch my quilt. It's sloppy, but it works. It's functional. I can now safely wash this quilt, which was my entire intention from the beginning. Hand sewing is a 4-letter word in my world. I don't like doing it. I don't have time for it. I don't have the patience for it, and I'm not very good at it. But if you prefer and can hand sew, I would say that it's probably worth the time to go in and hand sew both of the patches down from the front and the back if you have something that needs to be repaired. This is also a technique that could work on an antique quilt. If you've bought a quilt and it's starting to deteriorate a little bit, you can just put a cute little patch on there. And I've actually heard about people who label those patches. So I think with a Sharpie on the back side, I'm going to write Akumu was here and actually date it so that I know what that patch represents, or whoever else picks up the quilt will know that that's part of the story as well. Thank you, friends, so much for tuning into this week's video, and I will see you guys all in the next one. Bye!